this is one of those scandals that you could just kind of get out of a television program about politics. This is like the classic oh shit scandal, right? This is the oh shit scandal. So I don't know if we can maybe pull up the video. So as you just pointed out, Xóchitl Gálvez decided last year to put her children in key positions in the campaign, right? That was her decision, right? For whatever reasons, and we can discuss it, she decided to make this guy here, Juan Pablo, the head of the youth networks in the campaign, to go out basically to do youth outreach to try to get young people to vote for Xóchitl, because that's actually her worst demographic, right? I mean, she's not doing well in any demographic, but she's doing particularly poor in the 18 to 25 demographic, right? So what came out was her son out in front of of a club in the most exclusive part of Mexico City, Polanco, which is, as José Luis pointed out, was based on Beverly Hills, right? In the part of the city, if I'm not mistaken, where his mother was the delegada, basically the head of that bureau, head of that district, right?
Yep.
So we don't have the audio on in there, but what he's basically saying is he's insulting the bouncers. He's saying, basically calling them poor by saying that they eat tacos, right? He's saying that they don't have any balls, right? He repeats this repeatedly. Where are your balls? Where are your balls? Right? Because they're not beating him up. Because they know they can't, because he's the son of the delegada, right? He's also says at another point, there you go, you sell out for 3 pesos. He also said at one point he could batter a woman if he wanted to. I mean, it's a really bad video. And it goes on for 5 minutes. He's obviously clearly drunk or high on whatever. And it just crystallizes so much of what we've talked about the Mexican rights, racism, classism problem. It just distills it. It's all there. If anyone, might have thought that we had been maybe exaggerating a little bit over these last episodes, talking about the posters and the signs you see at the rallies and the comments that people make, we're not. If anything, we're probably understating the case when you see something like this. He goes on for 5 minutes. He's misogynistic. He's racist against the bouncers. He's classist. He's basically just saying everything. I can do whatever I want because I'm the delegada's son and I'm lighter skinned. And they just have to kind of contain him for 5 minutes as he goes on and tries to be this tough guy, right? This tough guy, right? So it was a brutal video. And a brutal blow to what was an already failing campaign by Xóchitl Gálvez, which then required her campaign to scramble, right? So then you get, again, the excuses, right? From the same people who tried to excuse, days later, the storming of an embassy against international law, you get people trying to excuse this, saying, basically, boys will be boys. Mm-hmm. He was underage. He was 17. Not true. Not true. Well, then they said, well, it was a whole year ago. Actually, not true. It was in November of last year, so it was recently, right? We've all gotten drunk and done stuff, right? Well, if you're a rich white kid and the son of the delegada, maybe, but the average Mexican knows they couldn't get away with this.
Oh God, no.
Wouldn't even want to, but I mean, they'd get beaten senseless and maybe more, right? So just the distillation of all of this privilege, all this nasty bilge coming out of his mouth, and so he had to come out and apologize. He had to resign from the campaign, right? As José Luis pointed out, Claudia Sheinbaum, did the proper thing from the point of view of the presidential candidate, saying we're not going to get involved in going after a candidate's children, as did the First Lady, Beatrice Mueller, who's had to defend her children against all kinds of things. But as Alejandro Paez Varela and Alvaro Delgado and Julio Astillero and a lot of other, journalists of high prestige in the country pointed out, he was a member of the campaign.
Yeah.
He had a position in the campaign. So the nepotism is the problem. If you didn't want him to be facing this kind of scrutiny, you should never put him in the campaign in the first place.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about it. Basically what it did was, in the eyes of many, was confirm what they always suspected about Xóchitl and her campaign and the parties that are backing her. You've got to remember, we've talked about it on this program. Why was she chosen? She was a bit of a marketing exercise. She could sell a little bit better. She is the daughter of a man who is Otomi, indigenous, and therefore has the popular touch. And this video comes out and basically betrays all of that, right? I mean, what kind of lessons did you teach your son to make him think that he can adopt this kind of attitude with people who are darker skinned, who earn less money than he does, right? And it just served to confirm that, no, she's not any different. She's more of the same, these kind of attitudes. And this isn't new in Mexican politics. The children of political leaders in this country have been a huge headache. I remember when Peña Nieto's daughter called us a bunch of proletarians, right? This is their attitude. They think they're above society. They think that this country belongs to them. It's a kind of almost a feudalistic attitude. And I think, the fact that she canceled all of her events as a result of this scandal
Canceled her events the next day, yeah.
How much they were worried about the impact of this. And I think they were hoping they would bounce back with the debate, but they didn't. And then it was followed up by another scandal involving her daughter, which it turns out...
Just very quickly on this,
yeah.
too. Are you talking about president's kids? Remember the Ernesto Cedillo's kids at the U2 concert?
Oh, right? Yeah. Yeah. Were their guards actually, they weren't guards. They were members of the Mexican military, yeah.
Who beat up, who did they beat up there? Somebody from the U2's
It was actually from the band's, Entourage, yeah.
Because the kids were acting up. And this became an incident to the fact that U2 refused to play concerts in Mexico for, I think, over a decade after that, because of Cedillo's kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the extent of the overweening sense of entitlement here. So let's go on to this next example.
Yeah. So, sin embargo, did a little bit of digging. You mentioned Alvaro Delgado. He's the head of investigations there. And it turns out that Xóchitl Gálvez's daughter, who again, it's not about her that's not because it's her daughter. It's because she occupies a political post, right, in the campaign. She is one of the forces behind some of this troll center bot army activity, the Xóchitl Lovers campaign, very has been tied to her, has, oddly enough, 2 birth certificates. Now, that's curious enough to begin with, but having 2 birth certificates can allow you to engage in some kind of questionable legal representation in her mother's companies, et cetera, et cetera. The report gets into the long and short of it, right? But there's a lot of there's some missing pieces here. They kind of get into this as well. In some reports, Xóchitl Gálvez says she's married. In other ones, she said she isn't, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the impact of this news here? How is it different from the previous scandal that we were just talking about? How does this affect the political campaign?
It's very similar in the sense of it reinforces the idea that there's one rule for you, the average citizen, and another rule for them, the elite, right? If you, the average citizen, were to act up with a bouncer, well, you probably wouldn't get out of that in pretty good shape. Especially if you were to hurl the kind of insults at them that Xochitl's son did. In this case, again, we have a situation where another, in this case her daughter, also, nepotistically in the campaign, has 2 birth certificates, right? Which allows her to have, different roles in, such as different network of companies, right? Which is, it's a form of fraud, and it's a form of, legal evasion, right? Of different things, and it reeks of this idea that, the elite will do whatever kind of shell games in order to, have their advantage. And this actually came out in the debate last night when Claudia Scheinbaum very correctly put Xóchitl Gálvez in the spot and said, the reason why you don't want to get rid of some of these autonomous agencies, right, like the HINAI, is because you're getting contracts from them, right? That's what these supposedly autonomous agencies are good for shoveling contracts into these people's companies.
Yeah.
Right? And then Xóchitl comes out and says, no, it's not my company's, it's my husband's company. And that's exactly the issue here. That's exactly the issue here. It's not my company, it's my husband's, or it's my daughter's, or my daughter has a place here with one birth certificate, or my daughter has a position in this company with this birth certificate. Right?
Yep. And that was the normal. That's how things worked in this country before López Obrador. That's what we talked about in the last episode around Salinas Pliego, where it was normal to get all these tax write-offs, where it was normal for public territory to be handed over so you could have a golf course, right? Where it was normal for you to, mention you're married on one hand and single in the other, and oh no, I have nothing to do with that company, or this company as the board of directors is my daughter, but actually using a different last name, et cetera, et cetera. That's impunity to operate out of however they like. I mean, it makes me think, right? Xóchitl Gálvez presents herself as a humble woman who grew up selling Jell-O on the streets to make a living. That may or may not be true. I have my doubts. But today, she's an extraordinarily wealthy woman. And how do you get wealthy in a country like Mexico? Thanks to your political connections and likely fraud.
Yeah, right. And, anyone who's lived in Mexico, you know how difficult all this bureaucratic stuff is, birth certificates and CURPS and getting your RFC, your tax registry. And it's just, the bureaucracy in this country continues to be a real problem for the average citizen, right?
Yeah.
And heaven forbid you have one letter wrong in your birth certificate or one tiny thing wrong. And this happens because a lot of people, come from pueblos and, not everything was, especially decades ago, not everything was recorded. So it can be hell for someone to try to clear up problems in their official documents. If there's a problem with the name, if there's a discrepancy, if there's the most minimal discrepancy, that can make it difficult for you to receive services or get your pension. It can become hell. You have to spend hours and days and weeks and months going from office to office to try to clear up these things.
Yeah.
Right? In order to get things in order. And then you just see this daughter of this elite presidential candidate with 2 birth certificates. Whatever. Right? Because it's convenient for them. That's why this rankles so much. Right? It's not just a question of, 2 different pieces of paper. It rankles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's not her first scandal, right? She's connected to the family that was involved in the construction of the home where Xóchitl Gálvez now lives, that she paid under market prices, et cetera, et cetera. It speaks to a pattern, right? Where they just have no scruples.